Hello, everyone. We now welcome you all to our next session after our enigmatic session on uvea. Coming to the next session, which is age-related macular degeneration. So I would like to invite and welcome Dr. Saurav Sinha, sir, as a chairman, Dr. Nitin Prabhudesai, sir, Dr. Deepak Bhatt. Are you all here?
Yeah, Shrutika here, Nitin here.
Yeah, very good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So, first of all, let me thank Dr. Ragini Madam and Dr. Swapnish for having given me this opportunity to be a part of this wonderful conference. And let me congratulate the entire organizing team for conducting the conference so flawlessly and bang on time. So we're starting the session just 5 minutes past 5, and it's very impressive how the sessions are conducted absolutely on time. So without delaying much, we will move on forward to our sessions. As we all know, and most of you will agree, that age-related macular degeneration contributes to nowadays more significantly. Nowadays, it has started contributing to major chunk of our medical retina practice. One, probably it's with the age expectancy, which is going high, and number of visits, the regular visits these patients have to pay to a clinic, it has definitely overpassing the diabetic retinopathy cases also. So let us start our first talk by Dr. Saurav Sinha. Dr. Saurav Sinha is a prolific retina surgeon from Netralayam Eye Institute in Bengal, Calcutta, and he is part of many phase 3 clinical trials. I welcome Dr. Saurav Sinha, sir, and we have his presentation being seen here. Hello, Dr. Saurav Sinha, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Right. Good to go. Visible and audible?
Yep.
Yeah. Nitin bhai, namaskar. Okay.
Namaskaram.
So, pachychoroid, is it for real, or what is pachychoroid? I think this talk was a little relevant around 2 years back when we all grappling with this new word. But yes, it is for real. It does exist. And why I say this is a little of few of us, I can see this, all of us. I remember when our PGs were dull FR. So, samani dull FR likh diya. Then we, little bit intelligent, we said RP alteration, a better word to write. And we started also writing granular RP, nice words we are finding out to explain the same dull FR. Then we also said, describe the type of alteration, pigmentation like this, pigmentation. Then we said, no, CSCR. Then by late 2000 something, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, we started saying polyps. We started saying we can see on the other eye, sometimes imaginary, sometimes actual polyps. Then we said when ICG came along, by 2010, 12, 15, we started getting more used to these things. These are hotspot and BVN. So these are words that have come along the last 20 years as I've gone on my practice. These words have come along. Now, what are these words? PPE, PNV, PCV, FCE, PPS. Now, I have my fellows sometimes using these words FUTS, and I'm a little, what was that? Like, I did that passed me by. So we are used to having this OCT and FA. We've sort of mastered these two quite well. But mind you, the PPE, this pachychoroid was published way back in 2013. That's really 8-9 years back. So it's not a new thing that I'm discussing today or something that suddenly dropped into us. Pachy means thick. It's a thick choroid. I think this one definition says it all. It's describing the phenotype characterized attenuation of choriocapillaris. The choriocapillaris is attenuated with overlying dilated choroidal vessels and associated progressive RP or dysfunction and evasculation. So these 3-4 things happening: choriocapillaris attenuating, choroidal vessels dilated, progressive RP or dysfunction and evasculation. I think you know these 4 words. I think we got the talk through. But only you have to have an ICGA to help understand this, where you'll see hyperpermeable and dilated choroidal vessels. And on OCT, you have to do an EDI and see the increased choroidal thickness of the choroidal scleral interface and see how the thickness is, how many microns it is. And once you go into that, you see what is focal or diffuse. These are the 4 things: the choroidal thickening, the dilated choroidal vessels for the pachyvessels, and pachychoroid pachyvessels from that, attenuation of the choroidal inner choroid and choroidal hyperpermeability. 300 microns is considered the thickness, and extrafoveal thickness of 550 microns. Again, some articles vary from this. So this here is a focal thickness. I'll have more of photographs over here. So this is a focal, just single points over here, whereas this is a diffuse thickening of the layers over here. Now a Pachy vessel, this here is a Pachy vessel. I sometimes am not able to pick up these things. The more junior people are seeing these. Again, mind you, this is an OCT, this is an ICG. So sometimes one wonders what you have to see different modalities. And again, a vascular hypertrophy over here is seen on an ICG. Now, if you see again, this is an OCT, these are again OCT-A. One must assume, one must be clear that when you make these diagnoses, you can see choroidal thickness and attenuation here on OCT-A. Now, again, these are different words that we've used over the years: CSC, PPE, PNV, PCV. I'll try and quickly go through these. So I have only one slide here, which I'll try to show all of them. In a CSC over here is what we always said. A pachypapular epithelopathy is something we see all the time. This is what we would have called long time back as a dull FR. A PNV seen more clearly here on the OCT angiography. Clinically, didn't see too much. We see here on the ICG on the OCTA. Again, a PCV seen better here on the OCTA over here. Focal cord excavation seen definitely better on the OCT scans. And what is a pachypapular epithelopathy? Sorry. This here, what you see is what I was referring to as a dull FR. Now we stop using these things, and so you will see this the other eye normally of patients with CSR. So it's called a form first of CSC. Normally don't need to do anything about these, but you must watch these very carefully. Development of CS for CNVMs. Routine, what we see regularly, a pachyroid neovasculopathy. Now here, definitely on a fluorescent angiography here, and on ICG here, and what you see a double layer sign over typically. So a PNV was something which was not described to us less than 5 years, 8 years back, but we know that these are patients who might do a little bit better depending on what the history is on injections. Now, right. Now, focal cord excavation, again, these are entities one need to know, but one need not to say this is a fluid over here and treat these. This is a non-conforming type, this is a conforming type. And one must be aware of these entities because this does not need a treatment for shear what's on the right over here. PPS, again, a thick choroidal thickening over here, large fiduciary angiography over here, direct hyperpermeability, and what you go on to having a PNV. Now, what is the clinical significance of this? PNV is idiopathic, related to CSC, or you can have the RND CNV type. Again, type 1, type 2 types, the terminologies are changing continuously, and these patients will need anti-VEGFs, and sometimes some of them PDT, of course, out of the rule right now. We don't know. We hope PDT will come back soon to us. This is something we're more familiar with, large bleed, quite sometimes been there. When you see this over here, you have RP alteration, polyp thumb like PED. This is PCB for us. Now, there was a time, and there have been publications since then, that patients who in the 30s, 40s seem to have CSC have gone on to have PNV. All have these patients now, and PCV. PCV from PSC old patients, we have seen lots of these patients. This is PNV, something we are looking at right now for the last few years, more carefully with the better quality OCT, and the HRA OCT gives very, very clear pictures of this. Those of us looking at the OCT nowadays are seeing these better nowadays. These are like, I come back to our old slide, all 4 features, very important to understand: a pachychoroid, thickened choroid, focal or diffuse, a dilated choroid vessel, the pachy vessels, the attenuation in choroid, and choroidal hypermobility. These 4 features form the pachychoroid phenotype. And I mentioned those earlier. Again, these words, one need not mug them up. If you miss them up, if you miss them once in a while, doesn't matter. As long as you recognize them on your OCT angiography, OCT, ICGA, it's important that some of them do not need any treatment. So the take-home message, what I would like to give is, look for choroidal thickness in the other eye. One eye has a disease, look for choroidal thickness in the other eye. Or if you're having problem with one eye, unexplained, that clinically you're not able to see too much, look for choroidal thickness in these patients. CSC, with no typical leak, maybe have a slow growing PNV. Again, a OCT angiography in these patients is very, very useful. Sometimes OCT angiography is better than the ICG pictures. The PNV as a differential case of CNV, related to CSR, again, changing hypothesis at all times. And these are all 3 which will complement each other: the OCT, ICG, and OCT angiography. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saurav Sinha. May I ask a question here? Could you tell us some example where, diagnosing of pachychoroid really made a difference in the management process of a particular patient?
I would feel that today it's these 45-ish, 55-ish patients
Mhm.
who are not supposed to have CSR, but
All
have a
right.
CSR kind of a picture.
Right.
And they've been waiting for 3-4 months, which is not too bad, but it doesn't come back to 6 at all.
Right. Yes. Yes, we do see such
So
scenarios.
normal OCT just gives some fluid over there. These are the patients one should look for in the other eye. One should do an ICG angiography, one should do an OCT angiography, and some of them may do it better with anti-VEGF in these patients. I think it's very important. These pachychoroid should be thought of in these patients specific.
Okay, so you would give importance. I mean, you would tilt the balance to treating these patients with anti-VEGF.
Rarely, yes.
Yes. All right. That's interesting. Let's move on to our next talk by Dr. Deepak Bhatt, sir. We all are very used to seeing reports of Dr. Deepak Bhatt and meticulously they are reported. And I think he must be the most popular ophthalmologist among most of the retina specialists and ophthalmologists in Maharashtra. So, sir, are you ready with your talk?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Hi. Swapnesh, I can see your tired look.
All Mumbaikars are very lucky to have you all. You should have one branch in Pune also, sir.
Hi Nitin, hi Saurabh. Yeah.
Deepika, Mumbai needs 3 branches.
Yeah. स्वप्नेश आज जाके सो जाना तू यार. तेरा चेहरा बहुत ही थका हुआ दिखता है.
I've been seeing sir's reports for the last 20 years, more than 20 years now.
Just out of curiosity, sir, do you conduct any short fellowship or short observership courses in ophthalmologic investigation?
Yeah, I am always available on phone. Yeah, there's no fellowship or anything like that. Anything, anywhere, I get OCTs and every day on my WhatsApp and all. So that keeps us. सबको मिल जाता है. Fellowship is done online only for so long. Yeah.
On the go.
So one generation you have taught OCT. Now our generation you are teaching OCTA. So that is your legacy.
Okay. Anyway, let's
All right,
start.
yeah.
So he's told me about OCTA in AMD, and this is just going through cases. Okay, not any theory at all. I don't want to go into the theory of OCTA because everybody knows what's going on in the market for a very long period of time. So we have dry AMD and wet AMD. Okay, so dry, what is the role of OCTA? Frankly, not really much in terms of diagnosis, but most important is to rule out a subtle intermediate AMD with which of course is the new terminology which has come, but we still have not found out a clinical significance for that. Well, this is dry AMD. What do we see on OCTA? Well, choriocapillary atrophy and atrophy of the inner and the outer choroidal layers, which of course part of the atrophic process. But the most important role is to rule out a presence of or absence of a CNVM if you have a doubt on OCT. But OCT takes the chunk of the matter, is probably not required. Geographic atrophy, again, as I told you, there could be some areas where some amount of neovascularization is suspected. You do an OCTA, otherwise, frankly, OCTA is of no use. It's a clinical diagnosis and probably an OCT suffices at all. Again, a case of geographical atrophy. Now, this actually slide, I picked it up from Koskas's article, which was written 7-8 years back when OCTA had just come. But it's still the absolute gold standard to differentiate between active and quiescent lesion. And that's probably one of the reasons why we would do an OCTA in the first place for in a case of CNVM. Okay, so we have this case where there is a known CNVM, no CME, and no subretinal fluid. Is this active or not active? If you go by the criteria of Koskas, as I told you, amongst all the criteria, a dead tree appearance, if you remember that, dead tree appearance with no branches and no communications, peripheral anastomosis, is the hallmark to say that this is a quiescent lesion and this does not require any treatment. A case of, again, a patient who's received, this is what I get actually majority of times. 7-8 anti-VEGFs given, patient vision not improving, and sudden come back, kuch to bhi karo. Then they say ki chalo OCTA karke dekhte hain whether there is activity there or not there. This looks like a scar absolutely on an OCT. If you look at the OCTA, it is again a dead tree appearance. There are no peripheral communications at all. So this is a quiescent lesion, even if your anti-VEGF is not going to help. Because you might put in inside and patient might have a lot of expectations from whether should we do it or not. And FFA is not going to be helpful in this particular case. As opposed to that, what is the criteria of an active lesion? Again, this is an active lesion on OCT itself. Do we really require an OCTA? Well, more of confirmation and less of knowing what is going on further around that. So again, as I told, it's an active lesion is going to have peripheral anastomosis. This is the hallmark of an active lesion, and around the CNVM, we will see a sort of a clear area, which is like hypointense an area, and that is suggestive of an edema around the lesion. So this is an active lesion. Okay. Again, a case where, you know, here we would have called it whether query active, query not on OCTA, and this patient of course has received more than 10 anti-VEGFs, but his vision still is decreasing. Whether these are actually degenerative cystoid spaces or actually it is cystoid macular edema, I would not know. Look at this peripheral anastomosis all going around here. A large CNVM with peripheral anastomosis, I would definitely call this an active, and he would respond, and of course to a certain extent. Coming to another type of an active lesion, this is definitely an active lesion with subretinal fluid. Okay, we saw this peripheral anastomosis again, and this fluid actually is one of the very big hallmark of CNVM, because this fluid is the first thing to go away when we follow up these patients, especially if we do the OCTA within 3 weeks, not after 1 month. Then you see the first fluid going up, and patient's visual acuity is actually directly related to the fluid around the CNVM. Now I want to show you a case of follow-up, again case of active CNVM, which again shows classical anastomosis here and an active lesion fluid. So I had a patient who had was quiescent for a very long period of time, and he developed some amount of fluid, recent increase in fluid. Visual acuity showed very minimal changes, but not much really. And therefore we went and did an OCTA. Again, look at this OCTA at the choriocapillaries and the inner choroidal layer. This is classic dead tree appearance. It's how you would see in a forest area, you know, classical dead tree appearance, no anastomosis, absolutely like that. So now the question is whether that fluid was really needs to be treated or not needs to be treated. Point of debate, I don't want to go inside, but this is definitely is not going to respond to anti-VEGF. Myopic CNVM, actually I have found that the OCTA is absolutely fantastic in myopic CNVM, especially when you see choriocapillary atrophy on an FFA, and FFA will not be able to diagnose. Active CNVM, I want to show how the follow-up takes place. This is pre and this is post. See the amount of choriocapillary peripheral anastomosis which reduces here after treatment. So it is a very easy way to follow up, you know, these patients here. Again, you see go down deep, you'll see that the activity has come down, the capillaries have come down. And the same patient here. Okay, this is a case of follow-up. I would pre and post on OCTA. Okay, I'll show you the most important. This was the case of scar, and in the scar, we would like to see that this is really a CNVM or not. Though this all looks like an active CNVM, but this is more often choriocapillary layer. Therefore, I think segmentation is extremely important. So the person needs to sit in front of the OCTA to be sure what is going on. You don't have time for all this actually. Old CNVM, and I'm going to see about follow-up. 1 second. I think yes. PD and 1 second. I'll just show you one. RAP lesion. Yeah, so this is the case of RAP, classic cystoid spaces, and we see a track going from the inner retina down to the outside. And you look at the OCTA, this is a section in the superficial plexus, this is a section in the deep plexus, and this is a section of the choriocapillary layers. You would see that the CNVM starts here, goes deep down into the choriocapillary layer. And the most important is to see the video. If we follow the video, this will be going along the track here. This is the CNVM in the superficial plexus. Then we have the going down into the deep plexus, and we see the anastomosis in the choriocapillary layer with a fluid around that. So RAP is something that I have found out to be an extremely diagnostic and can trace us at what extent it is on OCTA. Actually, because of paucity of time, I have not included a PCV, because a PCV in OCTA is a big debate by itself, whether you see polyps or you don't see polyps. Some see, some don't see. So let's not go into that. So finally, OCTA is a tool which can be used non-invasively. Patient is compliant about it, very easily done. And at follow-up, it gives us a fantastic idea whether we should go ahead with the treatment or not. But still a point of debate for all that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
We're pleased to go through all variety of images that you had to show. So I have one question for you.
Yeah.
Like, if you have to name one category of AMD disease where OCTA definitely has an edge above the normal OCT, spectral domain OCT, what would it be?
Myopic CNVM is something in the last 3-4 months is somewhere where clinically also not suspected OCTA has picked up small myopic CNVMs. And you know how difficult it is sometimes when you have myopias of 20-25 diopters and more than that. And is another thing that I have came across is this RAP, which is useful. PCV at type 2 CNVM is something which can be done with OCT itself, maybe 99 or 95% of times. Type 1 CNVM, yes. With the newer OCTs, newer OCTs which are coming up, I have these the spectral domain. We are going to be doing more of type 1 CNVM. PCV plus minus. Yeah, Saurabh. Hi.
Yeah.
Sir, hi. No, I was exactly going to ask that in the I'll put the question that they were around.
Yeah.
Any patient who has come to an OCTA and you are inconclusive about it and you have set up ICG Karao.
So of course for PCV you are asking specifically, right?
Anything, any condition. Like I agree with you that the myopic thing even I have learned the last 3 years after hearing you all speak.
Yeah. So I have told
it's a fantastic prosthetic, and I was not doing that earlier, but
yeah.
So any patient, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
PCV is something more than 50% of times I would still say, because I have a branching vascular network, BVN. Yes, I have picked up in more cases than what I thought it was possible. But polyps is like, oh, there, not there. Imagination, too much of imagination and too much of yes no going on there. But I would definitely, but BVN sometimes is seen very well. So if you have a classic picture on OCT of a PCV and you see BVN, I don't know whether we should really ask them for to do ICG. ICG in probably, in Bombay, there are only very few centers who do that. So that is one thing which is not done so much in Bombay. But yes, that is there. But otherwise, other cases, not really. I would never ask for OCT. Type 2, type 1, and other things. Type 1I is one thing that I'm looking for in the Swepsos technology, which is still in the phase of development. So if we can really pick that, whether type 1 and PCV we can differentiate on OCTA is something which will come in the due course of time, because there's a lot of overlap between the two of them. Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Shrutika, I might have to leave just now because there's some family function waiting at home. So
all right, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Saurabh. Bye, Nitin. Bye.
Okay. So moving on to next speaker, Dr. Dipti Kulkarni. Dr. Dipti Kulkarni practices at Mirrors at Dr. Anil Kulkarni Eye Hospital as a VR surgeon for the past 6 years. She has done fellowship at Regina Institute of Karnataka, Bangalore, and she'll be showing us interesting cases of wet AMD. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Shrutika. I think I'm going to be cheating just a little bit. Dr. Swapnesh asked me to present interesting cases in wet AMD, but while I was perusing through my cases, I realized there are a few perspectives I want, some pearls from the seniors from. So I saw the names, Dr. Saurabh was there, Dr. Nitin Prabhudesai was there, Deepak Bhatt sir was there. I think even Bhavan Kule sir has joined the discussion now. Swapnesh is obviously there. So I want to know what your take on these topics. Just a couple of cases. This is the first case, 73-year-old gentleman. He's a diabetic, well-controlled sugars. He had left eye blurring since a couple of years. He said it had been increasing over the last 2 years. And since 2 months, he had some difficulty in reading. And when he had a metamorphopsia, which he noticed while reading a newspaper, that's when he came to us. So this is okay. OCT is fine. All that is okay. But to do an FA or ICG in this case with such kind of an asteroids, I didn't know if we are going to get enough information, to add something to this. So anyway, we went ahead. What we have is a 10-12-year-old Optoview on which I did this on-fast image. And we went ahead with the treatment. Initially, he took one Accentrix because he was not sure about brolucizumab. So we had to tell him what it is, and then eventually got convinced. We gave him one brolucizumab. He's doing well. Vision is stabilized now for the past almost 8-9 months, 6-9 parts. Reading also is fairly okay. He's happy. But what I wanted to know was, is there any role or are there any markers on this on-fast imaging that could help or that can correlate with an FA or ICG? I'll show you further cases also. In this case, is there any role for vitrectomy since these are such dense asteroid hyalosis? So he wants me to get rid of them. Whenever he sees the photo, he says, I don't want these yellow spots. Then if at all we do a vitrectomy, how is it going to change the dynamic for the anti-VEGF? So we'll come back to this question after the presentation. This is the second case. He was a 78-year-old gentleman again. He had a very dense cataract, counting fingers 3 meters was his vision. He had some previous episode of allergy to some dye when he underwent some heart surgery. So we didn't do an FFA in him. Again, we could do an on-fast imaging on the OCT. We treated him. He's doing okay. Vision is slightly improved. There's that large scar which keeps recurring on and off. And but my discussion again here is about how can we correlate these lesions? Can they be correlated on something? So I did go through some literature where things are being correlated between an on-fast image and an FA or an OCT angiography. There are a lot of studies about CSR and diabetic macular edemas, but nothing is being mentioned per se for wet AMDs or for that matter, even dry AMDs. There are autofluorescence studies, but nothing about on-fast, which is so readily available. And there are a few studies where they show that even in this previous one, where we can see that this hyper-reflective dots correlate with the leaky lesions on the FA. But this, of course, is applicable to DME, not applicable to AMD. So there was nothing much that could help me gauge what is happening in AMD. Again, whatever I came across, these are the hyper-reflective areas that they've asked us to watch out for when we are treating an AMD, and watch how they resolve or whether they increase. So most of the times the fluid is lying above these dots, hyper-reflective dots, and that's what needs to be watched out for. This is another case again. Okay, so this was a 59-year-old gentleman who came with a recent onset decrease or metamorphopsia. Actually, he's a banker by profession, so he had complaints by looking at the computer. I presume they must have had some previous episodes, but he has not realized this. So in this case, I wanted to do an FA. He was willing, but somehow the filter on the FA was not working. So this time necessity was the godmother of my discovery here, where again we did an on-fast and tried to correlate with what was happening. In this case, the more interesting point that I want to point out is he came back within 3 or 4 days, and within 3 or 4 days of giving an anti-VEGF, he chose Accentrix, but within 3 or 4 days of giving an anti-VEGF, there was total resolution of most of the SRF was gone. He was subjectively very happy. Vision had improved. He was able to read and start working. And going on these lines, this is of course a second scenario that I want to discuss about. Going on these lines, there was another gentleman who received, for a straightforward case, he received an injection, and this was just day 1 post-op. Actually, not even 24 hours. He received an injection on 30th August in the evening, and on 31st August, when he came back in the afternoon, the SRF was almost resolved. his vision was better slightly, but he had no subjective improvement. So my questions to the elite panel today here are: what are the earliest changes that we can see on OCT? Is there any correlation between an ONFAS, and how do we know when it is going to translate to vision improvement? And what I observed was in both these cases, PVD was fully present. Even we could see the Weissring on ophthalmoscopy also. So is there any role of PVD in the speed of SRF resolution? Sorry for the typo. Is there any role of PVD in the speed of SRF resolution? Thank you. So can I have Saurav sir's opinion or Nitin Prabhudesai sir's opinion on this?
Okay, regarding that asteroid case,
Yes, sir. This one.
usually as a practice with the asteroid, as it's a standard teaching that FFA works quite well even in the presence of asteroid.
Yes,
So unless this patient had some problem, I think we couldn't do an FA. But FFA always would be a preferred preferred investigation if you have dense asteroid, at least at the baseline. Because nowadays for AMDs we don't keep repeating the FA. We just do it once in the beginning if there is any doubt. If there is no doubt and if OCT quality is good, we really don't need FFA nowadays in most of the cases. But yes, this is one indication where I would definitely consider doing an FFA to confirm the diagnosis and even at times for follow-ups, because clinically it is difficult to judge the lesion whether it's getting better or not.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and definitely considering only for removing the dots, that's not a very good idea for vitrectomy, because
I
it's
agree.
Yeah.
Vision was 6/9 part N10.
Yes, sir.
What will you achieve? Like Dipen sir said, no vitrectomy for that.
Yes, sir.
Rather
absolutely.
vitrectomy karoge, uska anti-VEGF will not stay for a long time.
Yes, sir, exactly. That's how I'm supporting my decision of not doing vitrectomy.
and over the years,
No
we have seen,
vitrectomy,
over
not
last
for me.
30 years, we have seen that with dense asteroid also, patient surprisingly has almost 6/6 and 6 vision. Many a times.
And this
Conversely, when you advise them vitrectomy and you think you're doing a great job inducing PVD in these patients is very difficult.
yes, sir.
1, 2, you will actually end up not improving the vision too much because they'll have some pathology over there which you
Yes,
could not see possibly. That's what normally happens. So no vitrectomy for me in
Yes.
most cases.
so the on-fast imaging. Do you have any thing to share about how to correlate this with the lesions or anything, sir?
Frankly, we don't use ANFAS imaging so much, though there is literature. And again, recently it's been mentioned that for PCV also, if you watch those lesions, ANFAS would give an indication. But no, there is no single specific point which we really rely on ANFAS to. We use it in combination with other things. Like you do a B scan OCT, you do an OCT A, and you do see that in ANFAS, and probably just try to correlate, but no the total dependence on ANFAS.
Yes,
That's from my
in
side.
the absence of OCT, on-fast imaging will not give much information.
Right.
That's
Right.
okay. So, and this about the time of resolution of fluid that I was asking, sir.
Regarding with PVD, yes. See, nowadays because of brolucizumab, now people, because initially were scared, and so there are reports of brolucizumab acting within hours, as you said, in 24 hours. So these things are reported, but unfortunately for all anti-VEGFs, we rarely do OCTs
Exactly,
so
sir.
frequently. So
Yes,
we
sir.
really
Yes,
don't
sir.
know. We have to do a sort of study to really see, compare
Yes,
between the anti-VEGFs. So I think patient to patient it differs. Yes, PVD, most of the situations, PVD would help in resolution, but
Yes.
I don't know whether it will resolve so fast. Maybe, see, there is a point that giving your injection in the eye also, the people have shown that just giving
There will
air in
PVD
the eye
gets
would
induced,
cause
yes.
PVD. Yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
we don't know whether the giving the injection, that act itself has induced the PVD.
Yeah, I'm not of the opinion. I don't think PVD is doing the study results. No.
No, sir.
I'm someone else.
I'm speaking of PVD in these two patients was already pre-existing, not just with relation to the injection per se, but does a patient having PVD, is he more likely to have a quicker resolution, or there's no relation between PVD
I
and
don't think there's any correlation because we're not talking about only a tractional component. This discussion would come up. An addition, I'm not convinced about it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, that was a great discussion. Moving on to our next speaker, Dr. Sachin Kabra. Sir, We all know Dr. Sachin Kabra. He has done his, he's a popular retina surgeon in Pune. He has done his post-graduation and super specialization in retina from Shankar Nethralaya, where he was also awarded the best outgoing fellow. And he has 12 peer-reviewed publications to his name. So I hand over to Dr. Sachin Kabra. He'll be presenting about OCT biomarkers.
Yeah.
In
Am I
AMD.
visible, audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Shrutika. Thank you, team members, for this opportunity. Nice to see my teacher, Saurav sir. Hi, sir. Let's start. Well, I don't have any financial. I don't have any financial disclosure to make, and I'll be using the trade name just for the ease of communication. And the communication is going to be clinically oriented. We all know OCT has moved from the time domain to now swift-sort OCT, where we can see the majority of all layers of retina in a very beautiful way. Even the choroid can be imaged quite nicely. Practically what we are getting is a histopath section of the retina in optical format. So OCT has become a very important tool in our day-to-day practice. Now, what do we mean by OCT biomarker? Well, biomarker in medicine is actually a measurable indicator of the severity or presence of some disease. So when you use the word OCT biomarker, it just mentions some finding on OCT, which will indicate a severity or presence of some disease. Today, we're going to discuss about OCT biomarkers in AMD. Now, let's start with dry AMD first. We all of us are aware of this various stages of dry AMD patient comes to us. There are some early drusen, then there are moderate drusens, and ultimately the patient either lands into geographic atrophy when nothing much to offer except low vision aids, or if patient lands into CNVM when obviously injection becomes the drug of choice. Now the clinical scenario is not that easy always. Let's assume a patient comes in these two stages. When patient early AMD or intermediate AMD, can we prognosticate? Can we say that which of this patient will end up in geographic atrophy? Which patient has a more risk? Well, the answer is yes, because the OCT comes for help here also. There's a specific OCT biomarkers for this, which is known as RORA, RPE and outer retinal atrophy, RORA, RORA. Let's see what exactly it is. As the name itself suggests, the RPE is atrophic. The overlying photoreceptors are damaged. So the signal which is coming from vitreous, it gets hypertransmitted in the choroid. Basically, it indicates that RPE damage and photoreceptor is damaged. If the size is less than 250 microns, we call this incomplete RORA. If it is more than 250 microns, we call it complete RORA. It's a very important biomarker that RPE is getting damaged, photoreceptor getting damaged. And more importantly, if any of this early AMD patient has signs of RORA, they have very high risk of progression to geographic atrophy. So next time patient comes with this early and intermediate stage of AMD or dry AMD, and you do an OCT, you pick up this RORA. When the RPE is damaged, the photoreceptor damage, and the signal hypertransmission happening in the choroid, always be careful that this patient has a very high risk of landing into geographic atrophy. Now that was about dry AMD. What about wet AMD? Again, the patient is coming in this stage. Can I predict of which of this patient going to land up with a CNVM at this stage itself? Well, the answer is again yes. OCT comes to help here also. If you do an OCT with dry AMD patient, which is drusenoid PD, but the RPE is migrating into the inner retina, you get a hyperreflective foci in the inner retina. That means the RB defense is breached, and very high chance that this patient may end up in wet AMD. Another new term is known as non-exudative macular neovascularization. As the name itself suggests, neovascularization already there, CNM is already there, but it's non-exudative. The fluid is not coming out in the retina. The RP is strongly holding the fort, not allowing this fluid to come into the retina, which leads to irregular RP elevation, known as Sayre sign. And if this patient has a 15 times more likely to develop AMD, neovascular AMD. Now let's go to the wet AMD. Wet AMD, as the previous speaker was discussing, the same scenario even I can day-to-day practice. I have 4 very common questions. Am I dealing with wet AMD or PCV? Will my patient vision improve? Is the patient non-responder? Should I change to some other injection? And when I should stop injecting? It's a common question I come in day-to-day practice. Let's try to resolve it with OCT. Let's start with the first one. Am I dealing with wet AMD or PCV? As Saurav has already mentioned, the classical findings on OCT or on PCV is that either you have sharp PD or thumb-shaped PD with hyperreflective spots on the inner area of the PD, which indicates the polyp sitting here. And the branching vascular pattern spreads along in between, splitting the RP and the Brooks membrane from each other, leading to a double layer sign. The top layer is RP, the ground layer is Brooks membrane. The very hallmark of PCV. And the relative is now the OCT angio also, we can pick up PCV with OCT itself. Why it is important? The line of treatment is different, the prognostic will be different. Coming to the second question, the previous speaker was asking, will vision improve? Very, very important question. Patients spending so much money, so much injection they're taking. Will the vision improve? Can I have prosthetic state? Yes. What you look for is known as, we look for a fluid. In a CNVM patient, a wet RMD patient, the fluid can be intraretinal, it can be subretinal, it can be sub-RP. Now, what is important of all these levels? Let's see. Now, there is strong evidence that the intraretinal fluid, internal cyst, is often associated with poor prognosis, the poor baseline visual acuity and very poor improvement after intravitreal injection. And more importantly, the fluid persists despite doing multiple injection. He has a very high risk of fibrous RP atrophy. So in clinical scenario, if you have intraretinal cyst, it's a negative prognostic biomarker. On the other hand, if you have subretinal fluid, it is associated, is the retina is not, the fluid is not in the retina, it is a subretinal space. It is often associated with good visual acuity to start with, and it does improve the injection. And this leads to low rates of atrophy. A lot of studies have come up, there's always this mention that there's a protective role, kind of it protects the overlying photoreceptors from the damaged RP by putting some neuroprotective factors. So it can be tolerated, but however, this is a very highly controversial topic. Some people go for it. Personally, I go for aggressive for resolution of SRF. But on clinical point of view, SRF is always a positive prognostic biomarker as far as wet AMD is concerned. Sub-RP fluid doesn't have much role as far as the clinical practice is concerned, but if it's associated with intraretinal fluid or subretinal fluid, it indicates this patient is going to require more treatment. So number of injections will be more. But however, on a clinical point of view, it is inconsistent prognostic biomarker. Photoreceptor layer integrity. Obviously, the second white line from the bottom, the photoreceptors are intact, vision is going to remain good. The photoreceptors are damaged, obviously vision is not going to remain good. Nowadays, a lot of stress has been put in the third white line from the bottom, which is on the external limiting membrane. If that is intact, usually patient has a better visual acuity. Shrimp, or something known as subretinal hyperreflective material. The material is hyperreflective in the subretinal space. It is made of fluid fibrin or blood or scar. It is associated with very bad vision, irrespective where it is present and how big it is. If it is bigger, it is worse. But decreasing hyperreflectivity and subsequent follow-ups indicates a better prognosis with shrimp. So summarizing, wet RMD vision is concerned, if you have SRF, you have reasonably good prognosis. If you have intraretinal fluid or a subretinal fluid or a PD with a shrimp, usually have bad prognosis. Next question, is it a non-responder? Shall I change my treatment? Obviously, the intraretinal fluid is not going, vision not improving, we have to think. But is there something specific nowadays? Yes. There's something known as high reflective dots, as the previous patient also mentioned. Now, I have HRFs or HRTs in primary retinopathy. Now, they are documented in wet RMD also. They indicate the hyperreflective or the activated RP cells and a lipid microglia. And basically, if you see the HRD and you inject once and disappear on the first visit, it's a very good responder. And they persist after 2 or 3 injections. Usually, you need to change the injection because this indicates that this RP is still hyperactive and this injection not going to work. Last question, when should I stop injecting? Obviously, when the scar is already there, usually, but there is one specific findings on OC known as outer retinal tubulation. Basic name itself says tubulation, so it's a hyperreflective center, like a tubule, surrounded by uniform hyperreflectivity all around it. And it's outer retina, so it's outer retinal tubulation. It indicates the advanced RP disease, retinal disease, when all the tissues are coming together, supporting each other, trying somehow to survive. Now it is important, this can mimic a fluid and many people keep on injecting on this, but we have to differentiate the intraretinal cyst or the inner retina, while outer retina, as the name says, outer retina. The borders are uniformly hyperreflective. Here the borders are not uniformly, the shape is round, here sharing more of ovoid. This is how do you differentiate the intraretinal cyst from outer retinal tubulation. Again, differentiate from exudative cyst is that there are gaps in between, there's no uniformity, where aorta is a uniformly hyperreflective border. To summarize my talk, if AMD patient, early AMD, intermediate AMD, you do an OCT, you pick up an RORA on the OCT, very high chance this patient may land up in geographic atrophy. Is wet RMD or PCB, pick up a specific sign, double layer sign, which will improve. SRF has a good prognosis, intraretinal fluid has a bad prognosis. Is it a non-responder, which for the intraretinal fluid persistent? Look for a reflective spot where dissolving or not. When to stop injecting, the scar is already there. And if you're putting outer retinal tubulation without much fluid, better to stop these injections. Summarize, this is what it is. In a wet RMD, subretinal fluid good prognosis, intraretinal fluid bad prognosis, shrimp bad prognosis. Well, no one has become poor from giving. And I thank you for giving me time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sachin Kabra. As usual, it's amazing how you simplify any topic so systematically. We move on to our next speaker, Dr. Shruti Narnavare. She is a retina surgeon at Sarakshi Eye Hospital, Nagpur. She has more than 30 publications in national and international journals. She's also reviewer of European Journal of Ophthalmology, IJO, Pediatric Journal, Therapeutic Advances in Ophthalmology. Yes, we can go ahead with the talk.
Yes, ma'am. Is my screen visible?
Yes. Yes, Dr. Shilpi.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So thank you, Scientific Committee MOS, for giving me this opportunity. So PCV lesions per se are fragile and tend to bleed easily, and the incidence of breakthrough bleed into the vitreous varies from 4.5 to almost 20%. Here I am presenting bouquet of such cases. So case 1, she is a 70 years female presented with vision decreased to 6/9 since last 7 days. Fundus and OCT showed large serous PED. FFA showed leakage and hyperfluorescence. Patient received 3 doses of injection of aflibercept. 4 weeks after the last loading dose, vision was 6/9 paths with restoration of normal retinal architecture. But 7 weeks later, her vision dropped down to 6/36 with reappearance of taller PED. On repeat FFA, leakage was seen and ICG showed polyp. Patient was proposed and underwent PDT with injection anti-VEGF. At 1 month and 2 months, patient received 2 more doses of aflibercept. After 3 months, injection interval was increased to 8 weeks. Patient received 4th and 5th doses of aflibercept. But 6 weeks later, she presented with floaters since 2 days duration because of mild central vitreous hemorrhage. Patient was further injected with aflibercept. Patient received 2 more doses of injection of aflibercept at monthly interval, and this is 3 months and 5 months later that the patient had healed lesions with dry macula. Coming to case 2, she is a 50 years old female, systemically stable, presented with distortion of vision since 6 days. Fundus at presentation showed a tubular vesicle-like swelling encroaching upon the macula. OCT showed double hump serous PED. FFA revealed blocked choroidal fluorescence. ICG was not contributory, so the patient was advised observation. 3 days later, she presented with sudden decrease in vision to 2/62. Fundus showed massive subretinal hemorrhage over the posterior pole. OCT showed multiple large thumb-shaped PEDs. Patient was given biosimilar ranibizumab on the same day. 8 days later, she presented with total loss of vision, and there was total dispersed vitreous hemorrhage. B-scan showed low reflective opacities with corresponding lesion at the macula. Routine conservative management was advised for vitreous hemorrhage. Patient directly presented to us 6 weeks later. She had meanwhile sought the second opinion at higher center, where also she was advised to continue the same treatment. B-scan and fundus was almost as before, and the second dose of injection anti-VEGF was given. A month later, fundus and B-scan showed increased vitreous hemorrhage, but on B-scan, lesion size was minimally decreased. At this moment, patient was proposed vitrectomy. So patient underwent anterior vitrectomy and core vitrectomy was done. And one can see subretinal bleed, exudates, and the hemorrhagic PED, and therefore anti-VEGF was injected at the end of the surgery. So these are the post-op pictures at day 1, week 1, and week 3. First month after the surgery, second month after the surgery, third and fourth, she received monthly dosing of injections anti-VEGF. And this is 5 months after the surgery, 9 months, 1 year, and 1.5 years later, she is maintaining her vision. And this is the timeline for this patient. Now, 85 years old female, systemically stable, presented with vision of hand movements with total vitreous hemorrhage. B-scan revealed vitreous opacities with dome-shaped lesion at the posterior pole. So our diagnosis was CNVM with breakthrough bleed. Patient was proposed vitrectomy with anti-VEGF. In this video, we can see the chicken fat hemorrhage. After removing the chicken fat hemorrhage, we can see the large subretinal black hemorrhage extending almost up to the equator. FAX was done in this case and anti-VEGF was injected at the end of the surgery. And the post-op positioning was advised in this case. Patient further received 2 more doses of anti-VEGF. At the end, she had vision of 1/60 with the healed lesions. And this vision and the disease-free interval she is maintaining at 5 years also. Now coming to the last case, this gentleman had received 7 anti-VEGFs elsewhere for CNVM, and he presented with sudden decrease in the vision to 4/60. And this is the fundus picture. OCT showed large central scar with fluid with large PED parafoveally. FFA showed activity, and the patient received 3 loading doses of anti-VEGF, and his vision stabilized to 6/36. But 6 months later, he again presented with reduced vision to hand movements because of the vitreous hemorrhage. These scans showed large convex mounds suggestive of hemorrhagic kissing choroidals. If of massive choroidals, he was advised observation. 2 weeks later, we could see that there is bit reduction in the mound's height. Further observation was advised. 5 weeks later, mounds reduced further, and he was proposed vitrectomy for the same thing. So after removing the fresh vitreous hemorrhage in this case, we could see the CNVM lesion with exudates, hemorrhage, and with peripheral mounds. At 1 month, he had vision of 1/60, and he received 2 more doses of anti-VEGFs. And after 3 months, he had healed lesions throughout with the vision of 6/36. So to conclude, the prevalence of PCV is around 22 to 62%, while 63% of cases may have peripheral PCV. The clinical picture in these cases, they frequently present with pigment epithelium detachment with temporal equatorial location. They can be more hemorrhagic and exudatives. Lesions with breakthrough bleed, if we have breakthrough bleeding, mild to moderate vitreous hemorrhage, they can be managed with anti-VEGF alone. But in cases of non-resolving vitreous hemorrhage or severe vitreous hemorrhage, at presentation, vitrectomy with anti-VEGF should be advised. And yes, we need to remember that even after the vitrectomy, we should continue anti-VEGF treatment at monthly interval till all the lesions heal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shilpi. I think the cases were wonderful and managed very, very efficiently. Do we have some comments from the experts?
Shilpi, one question, like it seems that your patients benefit quite well in even after vitrectomy with anti-VEGF injections, because there is always a debate whether to give anti-VEGF injection in a vitrectomized eye, and probably steroids are like something like Ozurdex is a little better. But I think your experience shows that even with the vitrectomy, they work quite well.
So Ozurdex in cases of PCV?
No, in general. In general, I'm asking, like, because you have been using them quite frequently. I've seen in both the cases you gave almost 3 injections post vitrectomy.
Yes, sir.
So they seem to be working well, because there are few studies only which say that it does work equally well, whether it's a vitrectomized eye or a non-vitrectomized eye. But I think your experience shows that they work quite well. So would you recommend giving anti-VEGFs in a vitrectomized also?
Yes,
Vitrectomized
sir.
eye also?
Yes, sir. So we routinely also, in other cases also, if that is a vitrectomized eye and they are presented with us, we inject.
And your experience is that they
yes,
do well?
Experience is good.
Do they take a longer time for resolution, or it's almost the same as in a non-vitrectomized?
Almost the same.
Saurav, what is your experience? You experience the same thing? You give anti-VEGFs in vitrectomized eye?
So I'm sure all of us have a lesser number of these. Definitely, I tend to think more what you are saying. Smaller lesions, lesser amount of heme, possibly they will need the injections don't stay for a long time over there. so they need more injections. But I have one more point of view. One of the first cases that she showed, Dr. Shilpi, it was a fresh heme, which she said going up to the equator, and there was submacular large amount of heme. And if you've gone inside that, you can done a vitrectomy. These are good cases for putting in TPA, subretinal TPA, and you should be prepared for that. And just doing a vitrectomy and giving anti-VEGF, fine, I'm okay with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're inside there, be prepared to have a TPA, sometimes drain the subretinal blood, create a retinotomy. I think all of us are getting better at these things, and a lot of our colleagues have shown good results with this. I think it's time to get this. Unlike the last case, you showed some yellow patches here and there. There, I would say, don't do anything subretinal. Do vitrectomy, inject and come out. Don't do any heroics over there. But I think in that one case, heroics could have been tried because he was so huge.
Yes.
No way anti-VEGF will take care of that. And that is a patient with anti-VEGF like what Nitin is trying to hint a little bit. So much of heme, anti-VEGF may not work well in a vitrectomy in those eyes. So I think different situation, different treatments. That's all.
Sir, I think even after vitrectomy, if we just don't want to clear the vitreous hemorrhage or the hemorrhage, we want to treat the lesion. So even after vitrectomy, we need to inject because
Of course, I agree with wholeheartedly. No doubt about it.
Yes.
There is no discussion of not injecting. The
No,
discussion
there was
here is how
actually-
effective is it?
Yes,
No.
Yes.
The take home message is you have to inject. There is no question on injecting. There is no question of that. Must inject. The only discussion is that how long will it take? How many more will it take? That's all.
All right. Thank you very much for being a part of this entire presentation on age-related macular degeneration. Dr. Swapnish, do you want to say something?
No, thank you very much. And it was a very well conducted session, Dr. Shrutika. Thank you all the expert panels and very nice cases. And it has been a very fruitful day. The Retina Hall was very well attended. And even in this pandemic of webinars, MOS has crossed about 2,000 to 2,300 delegates registering as well as attending in large numbers. So have a great evening. And I'm sure everybody is waiting for the evening match. So signing off and thank you all and do join for the next weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank all of
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
All of you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.